But mankind won't be destroyed. The fact that you and I are working here today is evidence of that.
Let's feed the homeless. Today I'm going to be making something special. Because of the government shutdown being in effect, there are a lot of struggling people out here. Everyone deserves a good meal, and I'm very grateful to be able to use my privilege to give back however I can.
Somebody in the comments said, not all villains wear capes. Bro is making America great again. We need more people like you. I'm kinda homeless with the praying emoji and the screenshot of Ellie's face. Ladies and gentlemen, I just gotta say, we have officially reached peak degeneracy in society, and I'm here for the show. You know, I'm here to watch it all collapse, because what can I do but commentate about it, right? Buddy really came out here with many vials of Fireball alcohol. Stay away from that. It tastes good, and you can definitely easily OD on Fireball, and I've done that before, and I've puked my guts out, never again. But he's out here with many bottles of Fireball, vodka, and cigarettes, bro. Lucy cigarettes. And I just gotta say, why? Bro said, let's feed the homeless, and literally gave them alcohol and cigarettes. How is that feeding anybody?
There you go. This is mine. You're welcome.
So this man's just handing out machetes to a whole bunch of random homeless people, bro. I mean, you know, he says keeping the homeless in the streets. 100 emoji with the praying hands emoji. Look at this guy, happy as hell, no teeth with a machete. Is this even legal is my question, bro. Is this even legal? Like, bro, you're literally, you're contributing to further chaos and anarchy, essentially. What do you really think these homeless people are gonna do with these machetes? Genuinely speaking, you think they're gonna, you know, start coming out here, you know, I don't know, cutting down shrubbery and grass and keeping the streets from being overgrown with plant life? You think they're gonna start, you know, I don't know, chopping down fruit or, you know, harvesting things? Because that's what machetes are used for, right? Right? Ladies and gentlemen, I have a headache right now, so I just don't even know what to say anymore. Let me read the comments. Somebody said, bro, why the F would you do that? Crying emojis. Somebody else said, this is not funny. Another person said, can I get one more with an image of Kratos from God of War? Oh my god, it's my favorite game franchise of all time. Someone else said, you know, if they commit a crime with it, you're getting charged. Actually, maybe, I don't know, it depends on the state, right? Another person said, 0 kills, 100 assists with this image of an evil, diabolical looking monkey. Another person said, how can people find this funny? I don't think anybody finds this funny. Well, maybe a few people, psychopaths out there find this funny. You know, a few sadists out there that just like to see, you know, the collapse and fall of just society in general. Hey man, there are evil people in society out here who are, you know, on the sidelines, kind of like me, but I don't want to see people die. But they're actually on the sidelines laughing, enjoying it, and literally giddy like a firebug popped up on the hardest drugs possible, waiting for a building to burn down. Somebody else said, Lil Uzi Vert is not nice. And they showed this image of this guy. Please don't do Lil Uzi like that. That's crazy, bro.
There you go. It's so cold too. Yeah, I got that.
It's crazy how this man has God's plan in the background from Drake playing, and somebody else said, that is not God's plan, bro.
Oh, you're welcome. There you go. I got you.
Bro, this is just sad, man, that we even allow like this amount of homelessness to exist, man, when this country is one of the richest countries in the world. Yes, we are in massive debt. Our deficit right now federally is like $36 trillion, but yeah, I think we still still have enough funds, right? Non-existent funds, if you want to be technical about it, to get these people off the streets. In my world, I'm providing people jobs, rehab, and if you don't want to go to rehab, I'm sorry, like, you can't live on the streets. That's not safe. You're going to be 5150. If you're mentally ill, I'm reopening the asylums or better system for mentally ill people, so they're not out here running around with machetes, drunk, setting people on fire. Multiple women have been set on fire this year, by the way. I don't know if people know that. Set on fire on public transportation, stabbed, killed, great. And this man is inadvertently contributing to that problem. And our politicians, what are they doing about it, huh? Somebody said bro just sponsored like 20 fights that night. Literally, bro. A whole bunch of drunk people with machetes. I don't know if he handed out machetes to these groups of people, but I saw another video where he gave people both machetes and alcohol. I don't wanna die for them to miss me. Yes, I see the things that... Yes, ladies and gentlemen, machetes and alcohol. That outlive me. They gon' tell the story. This man is literally like the CIA handing out to crack to people in the 80s, bro. Like, what in the hell is this, bro? Somebody said, is this legal? Again, I don't know. I mean, what in the... Yes, I see the things that they will. This old lady just took the out. Bro, she was so confused. She saw a large bottle of vodka with a machete, and she was like, all right, I guess I'm taking this. Somebody else said, CIA during the 80s in all of Latin America. Somebody else said, why the machete, though? Like, bro, this can't be legal. A few moments later, or minutes later, with this image of, I believe this guy from One Piece, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know. Somebody else said, you will not be disappointed, master, with an image of this old guy, confused, accepting a machete with vodka on top of it. Bro, is that kid even homeless, bro? He just gave a random bottle of alcohol to some kid. He doesn't even look 21. Somebody said, not a single thank you. I think I heard some thank yous in the previous videos. Somebody else said, small investment in order to keep rent down in the area. That is diabolical, I'm not gonna lie. Someone else said, devil's plan, keeping that rent under 1,000. Totally legal, by the way. I think I heard someone say that is legal. You can hand alcohol out to the, homeless people if they're over 21. As for the machetes, I'm not entirely sure. Technically, it could be served as a gift, right? And machetes aren't inherently weapons per se. They're just tools with sharp ends used as, things to cut things. But, they don't have to be human beings per se or living creatures. At that point, you would have to prove intent. But honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy got banned. It's not even shocking he got over 400,000 followers with this type of content. Let's be honest, people like destruction and chaos and negativity. Let's be honest, look at my videos. Most of the videos that get the most views, you guys already understand the connotations that come with those videos. Literally, if I upload a video of fireman saves cat from burning building, bruh, video probably won't even crack 10K views. I'm gonna be honest. And of course, it made it into the news cycle. New York Post writes, wannabe influencer hands out massive machetes to homeless people, and he's coming to NYC. Wow, that is gonna be crazy. Facing this article from, I suppose, the uploader himself, he said, and I quote, I travel around, bulk record in one city, then for my safety, go to another city. So this man is just like on a traveling carousel of chaos and destruction from one city to the next. He says, I do the same thing there for like 2 weeks and kind of like travel around. That's crazy. They also say he should be in New York in January 2026. I have a lot of friends out there, so he's coming to New York. Wow. As if New York isn't already in utter chaos and anarchy already in certain boroughs and communities. This man is basically like the Joker of TikTok at this point, trying to further destabilize certain communities. He says he's gonna go hand out a bunch of machetes and fireballs there too. Firstly, in New York City, since I'm from the North, Jersey specifically, but went to school 10 minutes away from the city, I can assure you that is illegal. That's a federal charge right there. People who have machetes in New York City and intend to use them as weapons, that's a clear charge right there. Literally even wielding I believe a blade or anything adjacent to that over 6 inches in New York City could copy a charge. Oh, I was wrong. It says, according to Google, New York has strict knife laws that vary by location, especially in New York City, which prohibits carrying any knife with a blade of 4 inches or longer in public. So yeah, buddy, you don't want to do that. And ladies and gentlemen, the funny thing about this guy, it seems as though that he started out creating Fortnite clips. As you can see, he started out as a Fortnite YouTuber or TikToker, and those, clips would only get, a measly 1K, 2K, 3K, 5K at most. And then he started like transitioning into the homeless content, handing out alcohol, drugs, and all that to destabilize certain communities. And then guess what? He started blowing the F up. I wonder why. I wonder why this type of content started getting popular and why the Fortnite videos did not. Could it be because that this is what people want to see? Is this because, TikTok sees the algorithm, people are viewing liking. This is the most popular type of, you know, listen, I'm not trying to indict the people who watch this stuff. I'm not going to try to indict the social media platforms who push this stuff, but I will say the patterns are very apparent to me. Why do you think the biggest creators on the platforms or streaming, YouTube, TikTok, or drama-related content nowadays, politics, political content? It's not a shock or coincidence. Anyways, thoughts and opinions down below. What do you think about this, ladies and gentlemen? This creator, his name, you can see it on screen. I don't even want to say it out my mouth. I'm just disgusted. Thoughts and opinions down below about this. Also, DM me on Instagram or tag me on TikTok if you have any other videos or topics you want me to react or cover. And yeah, catch all of you in the next one. And I just gotta say, you know what? Just to play devil's advocate, he's right. But one thing I disagree with is not injecting testosterone into your body exogenously if you don't have to. And this is the problem with this guy. This guy who's going viral now, his name is Clavicular. He's basically a looks maxer who's just injecting himself with a whole bunch of drugs in order to make himself look good. And one of those drugs is including one well-known here in America by the name of meth. But it does start with an M and ends with an F. I'm pretty sure we all know what particular type of drug or category of drug I am talking about. But it seems as though this guy's going viral for a lot of different things that I can't really cover in this video because I want to kind of, you know, not waste people's time. But this 19, 20-year-old guy here, who at this point in time is known for bone smashing, which is taking a very hard object and smashing your facial bones, I believe to induce some type of bone growth at that particular area to make his face look more sharp. Yeah, that's the thing. He injects himself with third-party syringes filled with testosterone at the age of 19, 20 years old, when at that age, your testosterone should be produced naturally within your own body. If you hook yourself on testosterone at that age, your body won't be able to naturally produce it in the long run, so he's kind of fucked himself in that regard. He also say he sniffs meth in order to lean max, basically using meth to suppress his appetite in order to maintain low body fat percentages. So instead of just going on a calorie deficit, you know, not eating too much or possibly doing intermittent fasting, he decides to instead use meth in order to suppress his appetite. Now, to be fair, a lot of other influencers and creators and celebrities out there use another thing that we all know to suppress their appetites, and that is what we now know as Ozempic, a GLP-1 that suppresses your appetite too. But instead of using that, I guess because he can't get access to that for some reason, he decides to sniff instead. And by the way, most of his fan base is full of young teenage boys that he's influencing.
What drugs do you take per day? I'm taking testosterone every single day, 7.5 milligrams of caffeine a day. I use crystal and polygons. I'm not a huge one.
Yeah, so he said it himself. He's not a huge longevity guy. His goal is not to live for a long time. His goal is not to live to, 90, 100 years old by optimizing his health. His goal is to have as much fun as possible, look good as possible, make as much money as possible, and to get as famous as possible with the least amount of work necessary. And I get it, you want to work smarter instead of harder. You want to take the path of least resistance. But when it comes to a point to where it now starts to negatively impact your health, and you're exogenously ingesting or injecting yourself with narcotics, steroids, smashing your face with a hammer in order to get better cheekbones, yeah, this is what this guy has done in order to apparently get better cheekbones. And guys, I just gotta say, disclaimer, don't ever do this. This is not only will it probably just mess up your face, damage your skin, and actually do long-term physical harm to you, there's just no scientific evidence to support that bone smashing will actually get you better cheekbones. At this point in time, I don't believe there's any scientific literature to back up this theory. I know technically it can make your bones grow back stronger, but we don't know if it can actually enlarge them. Even if it did, wouldn't it just make some asymmetrical, lopsided effect over time? Because you're not applying the same amount of pressure asymmetrically to both sides in a constant manner for this to have the effect that you want. So likely this kid already had good cheekbones, and the correlation he saw by losing fat and revealing his cheekbones led him to the consensus that bone smashing was the cause for this particular type of effect. This is why they say correlation does not equal causation. People mismatch and identify the cause and effect of particular things all the time.
Wait, is it true you do? Somebody told me you do.
Yes. So I do to, basically suppress my appetite.
If it's Adderall, just say it's Adderall. Don't make it sound worse. But that is a very common tactic.
That's just sad, man. Guys, please don't use Ozempic. Don't use meth. Literally, please just go on a calorie deficit or burn more calories than you are eating per day. Additionally, if you have a very large appetite due to your genetics or complex carbohydrates, sweet potatoes, avocados, potentially yams, both types, if you know what I mean, and high quality meat. Pause. This will help to dampen your, your appetite instead of like literally injecting yourself with hardcore drugs. It's not necessary in my opinion. It just isn't.
Gotta get leaner.
Wait, so how are you not like tweaking right now?
Well, I mean, once you use it for a while, and if you use moderate dosages, you're just getting like the same effects of Adderall plus the appetizer. So if you guys didn't know, ketamine
This old guy's saying just like you. Just
is essentially the same, class of drug as
is he promoting? It's like, just so you guys know, if you're interested in buying the BeamNG, if you need good prices, is an appetite suppressant. In low doses, it's not actually as detrimental as people think.
All right, Sneeko, please don't even co-sign any of this, bro. Like, I just gotta say, because I'm a creator too, we're all in our 20s. Clav is like 20 years old, or he's literally about to turn 20, right? So we're all Gen Z creators. We need to stop this, bro. Looks maxing has taken over this culture in such a way that I can already see the logical conclusion. And I'm not per se against looks maxing. There are two different types of categories: hard maxing, and then there's soft maxing. Soft maxing, basically, good skincare routine, working out, low body fat, eating healthy, white teeth, doing things that aren't too invasive for your body naturally to make yourself look better. And then there's hard maxing. But this guy wants to get a double jaw surgery, by the way. He wants to pay $35,000. That is prime example of what hard maxing is: invasive surgery, rhinoplasties, double jaw surgery, surgeries for your orbital bone, your maxilla, to bring it. All that it's just unnecessary. The guy already looks good, and based off of previous images, I understand the things that he's done to make himself look better. It's obvious. I get it. Leaner, he's more tan. I think he used peptides and the quote-unquote bone smashing. I don't think that had anything to do with his quote-unquote ascendance. But clearly, he was younger here. He was still going through puberty. Man's had acne and all that. So obviously, a lot of the things that he's done to, make himself look better has worked objectively. However, I'm not going to condone people using hardcore drugs like the word that starts with M and ends with F. I'm not gonna advocate for people using peptides, right? That, if you want to use them, go ahead, but understand the risks that comes with that, and understand there are third-party factories out there that can poison you with low-quality stuff. And mind you, you have to inject peptides as well with this syringe. And then on top of that, I'm not gonna advocate for young men to exogenously inject themselves with testosterone, of which you have to inject as well. And then on top of that, he says he's using 7.5 milligrams of Accutane per day. Listen, if you have acne problems and no matter what you do, it just won't go away, and you're like Clav, 2 years ago or a year ago, understandable. Go to your doctor. If you qualify, go for it. But understand the long-term side effects of using all these drugs in conjunction with each other at the same time. Mind you, this guy is still 19, 20, and he looks like he's, 5, 6, 7 years older than that already. Also, additionally, apparently, he's been, he got his girl to look snacks as well, as you can see in this video here. So, obviously, they look better. I'm not gonna gaslight you guys. Objectively, they do look better, right? To a certain degree. Or they're more conventionally attractive. They both lost weight. They both got lean. Here they look like young, happy, whatever. Generic couple, right? Here they look like, I'm not gonna lie, arrogant, cocky, rich kids. Objectively, they've increased their SMV or their model-esque looks with the methods of which they proceeded with. Now, a lot of people will say they look uncanny, but you guys gotta understand what they did. He used that drug that rhymes with F, and he probably also likely influenced her to do the same thing. Mind you, this girl is still like 16, 17, and he's been also injecting her face with, I think, I'm not sure what, Botox maybe? So yeah, he apparently, based off of this title I'm seeing here, clavicular injecting his 17-year-old girlfriend with face filler. Listen, you don't need face filler at such a young age, in my opinion. I'm not going to condone this, I'm not going to promote this, because all of this is going to calm down over time. It's only going to age you faster, and it's only going to catch up to you in the long run. 10 years from now, come back to this video, and let's compare and contrast how clavicular looks, and I get it, Gen Z, listen, we are a very superficial, shallow, looks obsessed, brain rot obsessed, meme obsessed, social media obsessed, compare and contrast obsessed generation. Everything is about who's the hottest, who's the prettiest, who's the richest, who has the most clout, right? But I promise you, in the long run, a lot of this is gonna catch up. It is. And you know what? At least this guy, Clav, understands that he's not normal. He understands that he's an outlier and that he even acknowledges that he might be autistic. And it makes sense. I believe typically autistic people become fixated on particular things that make them obsessed and allow them to go to the extremes that I've seen this firsthand. If you're a creator like myself, you're experienced with a lot of different communities, right? Anime, cosplay, femcel, incel, red pill, ED, Twitter, political, liberal, leftist, right-wing communities, all kinds of communities, Redditor communities, and a lot of these people in these communities who take things to the utmost extreme of everything, they tend to be autistic. I've seen this myself after years of covering all these different types of people and communities. A lot of these people are just not normal. I promise you, the most extreme, like political commentators or finance YouTubers, drama YouTubers, people who are in the spotlight right now, who are really famous and rich, they're not neurotypical, right? So in my opinion, it tracks. It really does. So yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts and opinions down below about this. Listen, if you want to improve your looks, go for it, but try to do it as naturally as possible. Please try and resist exogenous drugs like testosterone, PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs. Drugs like clavicular is trying to promote intentionally or not. If you can, try and stay away from Accutane because it does have negative side effects, possibly. And probably just try and eat a clean diet, cut out particular foods that may trigger, cortisol levels that do trigger acne. As for the most extreme stuff like double jaw surgery that clavicular wants to get for $35,000, or limb lengthening surgery, this man is 6'2", apparently he wants to get to 6'6" so that he can maul people who are even taller than 6'2".
Why are you spending $100,000 on surgery to go from 6'2" to 6'6"?
I've always valued presence super highly. If you walk into a room, people notice.
Yeah, nah, bro. Like, this guy's crazy. But thoughts and opinions down below. I thought I'd just chime in with my thoughts and opinions about this guy, Clavicular, since, a lot of people like to hear my opinions on, certain things. And again, guys, I'm not going to gaslight you and say that he does not look better objectively as a man. I can clearly see that his looks have improved. I just don't promote the way that he's gone about doing that. That said, though, thoughts and opinions down below. And yeah, catch you guys in the next one.
I tricked Sam Bankman-Fried into a third interview with me, and this time he may have admitted to fraud. You'll be the judge. You can click to this timestamp if you just want to listen to the interview, but I want to explain the background, the strategy that went into this call, to try to learn where others had failed, including, by the way, learning from my own failures interviewing Sam. Now, first, I want to give some background. Sam at no point has wanted to talk to me. Every time I've kind of snuck on these Q&As and started peppering him with questions, he usually leaves. But I realized that since this is my third time basically doing the exact same trick, it was probably going to be one of my last, because at some point he was going to catch on. So I knew going into this, it might be my last chance to interview Sam. And because of that, I had to think long and hard about what the perfect line of questioning would be.
all of this, it is meant to be the case that these are positions where FTX could, if it needed to, margin call those positions and close them down in time such that it would cover all those shorts, all those liabilities. Obviously, that wasn't the case here, and that's a massive failure of oversight, of risk management, and of diffusion of responsibility from myself running FTX.
But just make this very straight. Was there commingling of funds? That's what it appears like. It appears like there's a genuine commingling of the funds that are FTX customers that were not supposed to be commingled with your separate fund.
I ain't knowingly commingled funds.
Okay, Sorkin tried and failed here to pin him down on the terms of service. Why? Well, because Sam escapes in this talk about a different part of the terms of service, which related to margin trading, where you take out some kind of a loan. And in a way, it was a complete deflection. Like, it doesn't matter that there's a separate margin trading terms of service because the people who weren't margin trading still should have had their funds kept safe. But it sort of threw Sorkin off track. And so now we're going to move to the Stephanopoulos interview, which was a bit better because Sam's going to try the margin trading story. But watch Stephanopoulos. He does a better job at honing in on the question.
But as you know, the FTX terms of service tell the people who signed up, none of the digital assets in your account are the property of or shall be or may be loaned to FTX trading. But you're saying that happened.
My understanding is a few things happen. The first is there is a margin trading facility on FTX by which users can lend out funds, by which other users borrow funds. And so there are explicit cases where there is, margin extended, where there is borrow lending.
If Alameda is borrowing the money that belongs to FTX depositors, that's a bright red line, isn't it?
There are a lot of cases where that's actually explicitly part of the programs and that are happening.
But not here. Here
already...
it says that the digital assets may not be loaned to FTX trading. They can't be loaned out.
There existed a borrow lending facility on FTX. And I think that's probably covered, I don't remember exactly where, but somewhere else in the terms of service.
But they'd have to approve of that. They're saying they didn't approve of it here. They're saying you approved of it.
Now, this is great stuff from Stephanopoulos. He refocused the question, but Sam's about to weasel out with a new trick. Go ahead and watch.
If you rewind to, the beginning of FTX, where, some customers were, I think in line with sort of existing relationships that they've had, at least in some cases, wiring money straight to Alameda Research in order to trade on FTX.
So you do know, and you did know, that FTX deposits were being funneled to Alameda.
So I was vaguely aware that that was how some wires were being sent in the first place.
Didn't that set off alarm bells in your head?
So there are a lot of people who are involved in that process. And look, I really deeply wish that I had taken a lot more responsibility for understanding what the details were of what was going on there.
This is how he slips out again. He tried the margin trading explanation. It didn't work. So he pivots to, okay, well, there's this weird backstory where FTX used to take wires from Alameda. And maybe that's where we lost the money, right? It's another smokescreen. But unfortunately, it kind of hamstrung the conversation. And if I was going to succeed, I'd have to beat that explanation. And in the first couple interviews I did with Sam, I tried to go with this insider angle, where insiders I had talked to had told me something very different, but it didn't work. Go ahead and watch.
There's sort of all this talk about the terms of service. Did you break terms of service? Did you not? You're basically claiming that there was this separate side of your terms of service. But I talked to somebody from Alameda and asked how big the position of or how many people had assets in the type of accounts that terms of service would apply to versus the regular terms of service, which said you couldn't use their money. And they said it was about $1 billion that was in the margin trading or the margin side of things where you could reuse their funds or whatever. And there was the rest of it was not there. So it seems like you're putting all your eggs behind this one excuse about, there was this separate side of the terms of service. How do you address everyone else?
So I don't have all the data in front of me. My memory is that it was substantially more than $1 billion. I can't verify that. On top of that, there were other effects as well. Some of those were early wire transfers sent directly to Alameda.
Yeah, I kind of got stuck where Stephanopoulos roughly got stuck. I should have known that he was just going to refuse the evidence of insiders and just say, well, I disagree, and go back to his Alameda wire explanation. And I tried following it up a bit, but it didn't really matter. I had kind of missed my shot on that particular angle. And as I reflected on this, I realized all of the talk about margin trading, future trading, wire transfers to Alameda, all of it is a smokescreen from the big problem. The big problem is that some percentage of FTX's customer base never sent a wire to Alameda. They never signed up to margin trading. They never did spot margin. All they did was put their assets on the platform, and they were told that their assets would not be borrowed, it would not be loaned out, and that money would always be there. And it wasn't there. Why wasn't it there? There's no other way to explain that. If the money's not there, then fraud. And I had to laser in on that one point, not get distracted by these shiny objects that Sam's throwing up about this or that, or what about this, what about that? No, there's only one question that matters, and it's impossible for him to answer, I thought. So that was my strategy going into it. That was the backstory and how I learned from previous interviews. So without further ado, here's my third and probably final call with Sam Bankman-Fried.
I'm about to go up.
Okay, coffee, you're up.
Hey, Sam, it's me again. I just wanted to ask real quick about the terms of service question, which Recht brought up a little bit. I want to expound on it. Can you just tell us, yes or no, were you treating client assets just on the regular digital asset side different from the margin trading side?
I do think we were treating them differently. There were a bunch of different sides. There were more than two sides there. But I do think that we were cognizant of the fact that like there were differences between uses for like margin versus staking versus spot versus futures collateral versus other things.
Yeah, just people. I'm just talking about people just putting Bitcoin on the exchange.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was really clear terms of service around that. If it's true that you didn't invest client assets, not even in treasuries, as you said via a now deleted tweet, why do those client assets no longer exist?
So I'm trying to trace through some of this. Here's my best guess, and I wish I could give you a more confident answer, but I don't have the data. But my best guess is basically it's a combination of the following. One piece is the transfer sent directly to Alameda Research from customers. One piece, and that I think is a fairly substantial piece. One piece is.
Wait, can you explain what that piece means? So people were sending money to Alameda instead of they were getting credited on FTX, and Alameda just ended up using those funds, and they were never held separately per the terms of service.
Well, there was a separate legal agreement with that. I don't know the details of it. I don't have it in front of me, but there's a separate legal agreement with respect to transfers that were sent directly to Alameda Research by users, especially before FTX had its own bank accounts. And so I do think that is part of what happened there, likely.
Let's focus on only client assets that happened after FTX got a bank. Y'all said digital assets are treated a very specific way. Why were those digital assets not treated that way?
So of the remaining piece, and there's a few other pieces as well around futures and other things. I understand that's not what you're talking about. For the ones that you are talking about, right? For the ones that were left, and I'm just taking a stab at this because I don't have the data, but my best guess is the following: is that there were a lot of those assets remaining. We processed something like $5 or $6 billion, I think, of withdrawals over the few days prior to, or I guess the few days during the crash, and there are still a few $1 billion of those remaining, I think, in the estate. And so you put those together, you have many billions of dollars of those assets. But I think And so that's part of the answer, is that there were a large number of actual assets there. I think there's one follow-up question you probably still have there, which is, well, how about people who didn't withdraw and were also connected? And part of the answer is, well, there's still some number of billions of dollars of assets, of hard assets.
No, is there one-to-one assets? Because that's the whole thing. We're talking about a separation of funds. So those funds should be a completely different, in a different place, in a different wallet than everybody else. What you talked about, servicing billions of dollars of withdrawals, has nothing to do with those specific digital assets, because that's just first come, first serve, whoever pulled out first. We're talking about people who never agreed to have their funds loaned out, who never agreed to have their funds put on margin. They should have, according to your terms of service, one-to-one backing. It should all still be in some bucket somewhere. And are you confident today, as the CEO of FTX, this has nothing to do with Alameda, are you confident today to say that those are absolutely real, they exist, and they're present, people are backed one-to-one on client digital assets?
So I think, and again, I'm just taking a stab here, but I think what happened is that if you look at, especially a lot of the withdrawals that happened, those withdrawals were not necessarily only coming from people who never used margin trading or futures or staking or anything else. Those weren't just withdrawals from people who were one back, or sort of just keeping them as pure spot balances. And it was omnibus wallets, between the various categories. And so I think that the answer to your question is that a number of those assets were withdrawn by people who had balances on the exchange, potentially in the few days prior to the collapse. And if you wanted to think about it this way, it could be that that happened, and then when the collapse completed, that effectively meant that there was, if you want to put it this way, like fungibility for use withdrawals of assets for people who had not
But that means that there is no separation of funds. If there's fungibility between two different buckets of kind, there are no buckets. It's just one bucket. Everyone's taking out of the bucket, which means substantially anyone who had your terms of service with digital assets wasn't actually subject to that term of service. They were subject to the same terms of service of your margin trading, right? Which is your more risky product. So you subjected everyone to the higher risk product, because fundamentally, when it came down to it, you're saying there's fungibility. It's $1 here, $1 there. Everyone can take out $1 as fast as they want. Don't you see that as like defrauding your customers, the people who trust in you to just say, hey, this is not going to go anywhere except for we're not investing your assets? If I can exchange one-to-one, and I'm the one who put risky stuff on with risky assets with risky terms of service, I can take the money that someone who didn't sign up to those same risky terms didn't agree to. Isn't that fraud?
So I'm specifically talking about what happened in the days immediately during following the election, that 3, 4, say, so day period. And during that period, I think we may have allowed just generalized withdrawals. I think that was, if you're saying that we should have held up withdrawals for everyone who had an open futures position, for clawback potential or something like that, I don't know. Maybe that would have been the right thing to do. I hear where you're coming from on that. I felt, at the time, that we wanted to treat customers equally. It was an
But they had agreed to different things, so you can't treat them equally. I mean, it's like, this is the whole problem of the story of FTX and Alameda, is all the funds were being commingled. Isn't this just another story of commingling funds, except this is now FTX, which you can't pass the blame to Alameda anymore. This is your company, your funds, that you are treating all the clients the same when they clearly signed up to different terms of service.
So I just want to respond to that, and please, I completely respect your question, but you have monopolized all of these discussions, CoffeeZilla. You need to let others speak, and you need to respond to what I'm saying and not grandstand as much here. I completely understand where you're coming from, but to answer your question, I make a decision there. I just process withdrawals as we normally do until it became very liquid anymore, at which point we shut them off. And it was the case that, like, at that point, there was a liquidity pool. That's what happened. If you want to judge that process and think that, like, we should have been spending those days frantically trying to code up a new withdrawal process, I disagree with you, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, sure. I think that's fine. I mean, it's not about coding up a new withdrawal process. It's about treating your client assets the way you told them they'd be treated, right? It's a very different thing completely. But anyways, I'll stop grandstanding for Sam. Thanks, guys. Oh my Woo! Oh my gosh. Wow. We got the call out. We got the shout out. All right. You can probably tell I was pretty excited about that because I finally got what I was looking for. A straight answer on the problem of funds, right? Sam explicitly says that FTX was not separating funds. They were allowing generalized withdrawals. The dollars were fungible from different buckets. You can't do that. We finally dodged all the BS about margin trading, about Alameda wires. We finally got to the heart of it, which is that there are no funds left over for the people who just should have had their funds separated because they never separated them from the beginning. They were always seemingly commingled. And although Sam wouldn't necessarily agree that they were always commingled, the proof is in the pudding. FTX owes billions of dollars that they do not have. And it's because of how they allowed withdrawals. To give you kind of a regular finance analogy about why this is so cataclysmically bad, and in my opinion, fraud. Imagine you banked at JP Morgan Chase, right? And you have your money in the savings account part. Well, then you find out that they actually had this risky hedge fund. And you know what? They actually kind of blew up. In fact, they blew up so badly that JP Morgan Chase is all shutting down. But when you go to the bank to withdraw your money, you find out that instead of keeping your money safely in your savings account, they had allowed the people in the hedge fund business to just withdraw. You know, first come, first serve, right? They treated all clients the same, according to them. Well, you say, well, no, that's fraud because you signed up to very different terms of service than the guy who knew he was going to be like, you know, in this hedge fund, right? He had a different level of risk. He acknowledged that level of risk. And if you just throw all the money in one pot, the terms of service are meaningless, right? You're exposed to the same level of risk as the guy who took on huge risk. And that's fundamentally what happened to FTX. That's fraud. They told people their money was safe, and ultimately, they just subjected everyone to the same risk as like the day trading degenerate gambler on 100x leverage. And I really found the last thing Sam told me like so telling.
To answer your question, I make a decision there. I just process withdrawals as we normally do. That's what happened. If you want to judge that process and think that, like, we should have been spending those days frantically trying to code up a new withdrawal process, I disagree with you, but I understand where you're coming from.
This is so interesting because no, of course I don't think you should be coding up a new withdrawal process while you're going bankrupt. But if throwing all your client funds in a pool and letting the first come, first serve get the money, that's the wrong process to begin with. Your process was fraudulent from the start. It should have never been your process. Your process should have been what you promised clients, which is of course what I told Sam. And although I think Sam's probably guilty of a lot more than we covered here, I really wanted to get to this minimum viable fraud case, and I think we did get it. I mean, there is no sort of wiggling around the fact that he was the CEO of FTX, and all of this stuff that was bad, that we proved, happened at FTX. You don't have to invoke Alameda to get to this, so you can't say he didn't know, because he definitely did know, and he says he knew. So the last thing I'm going to close on, and I think thought it was the funniest part, was this little outburst at the end about me monopolizing his time.
So, I just want to respond to that. I respect your question. You have monopolized all of these discussions, Coffeezilla. You need to let others speak, and you need to respond to what I'm saying and not grandstand as much here.
And I thought it was notable for two reasons. One, he hasn't lost his cool once in any interview. This is the first time I heard him crack.
rabbit hole even more bizarre than anything we've covered on this channel before. And today, we're diving down to its very Before we dive into this incredibly dark topic, I chose not to do a sponsor on this one as it just didn't really feel right. But if you want to support the channel, I do have a Patreon page that offers some exclusive benefits. For example, less censored versions of videos like the one you're watching right now. Or you can just go over and check out the new Ghost Hunting channel that myself and Max posted. We've got a brand new video dropping at the end of this month and then a ton more already filmed and ready to go after that. So there will be lots of content coming very soon. Links to both of these will be in the description. And with that, let's get back to the video. The story begins in the early days of the internet, a time when, due to the general public's lack of understanding of this new online world, moderation was at its most primitive and nefarious activity ran rampant, with many of the worst examples coming from the dawn of live streaming. Back then, streams and their associated chats were almost entirely unregulated, leading to them becoming a cesspool of all sorts of degeneracy, and it's within one of these very sites where Amanda's torment began. It happened on a website called Blog TV, where Amanda had logged in one evening at the age of 13 to the tune of 200 viewers. It was here that she would be pressured to eventually finish the camera with a whole chat she had put on, a decision that she would regret not only in the moment, but for the remainder of her life. Lurking in the chat room was a man under the alias of Tyler Boo, who had been waiting for that very opportunity to grab a screenshot and recording of this young girl in her most vulnerable moment, before immediately turning around and using that image as blackmail in an attempt to leverage it for more private performances. It was a demand that Amanda refused, though truthfully it wouldn't have mattered anyway, as Tyler would turn her world into a living hell of online harassment, with a photo and video being sent to all of her friends, acquaintances, and family members. It got so bad that on multiple occasions her entire family would be forced to move, though this was of no use, as Tyler's evil crusade persisted. Every new school, every person she interacted with, would eventually be met with the content from that fateful stream. Amanda could never outrun him, and with nowhere left to turn, she would take up drinking and drug use just to cope, until eventually, on October 10th, 2012, she just couldn't take it anymore. The story of Amanda Todd is a complex, tragic tale, with many factors ultimately playing a role in her untimely passing, with none being more prominent than her harasser. And with her video gaining immense virality following her passing, all eyes were on Amanda's case, with the big question being, who is Tyler Boo? A question that leads us to a particularly disturbing discovery and today's main topic. As to unmask this abuser, we have to first recognize that he wasn't alone, but rather was part of one of the most bizarre and deranged communities ever uncovered on the internet. With Amanda's story making headlines, Canadian authorities quickly began work on their investigation, dedicating a team of detectives to unmask the man behind the Tyler Boo alias. And there, it's likely that they discovered that the crimes Tyler had committed were far more common than you would imagine. Back then, Tyler was what is known as a capper, someone who prowls live streams of young women and men across the internet, egging them on into performing some type of lewd act. And upon convincing them to perform said act, these cappers would then take screenshots or recordings, also known as caps, immortalizing the moment in an image or short video. For some cappers, this is where their involvement ends, but for many others, it goes much deeper. Once in possession of the caps, they will then use this as blackmail against the victim in order to further extort them, which is exactly what Tyler Boo had done to Amanda. And she wasn't alone. Back then, this kind of stuff happened on a freakishly regular basis, with hundreds, even thousands of cappers operating on a given night, with a list of victims being essentially immeasurable. Victims who had their lives completely and utterly destroyed by these malevolent outside forces that forbade them from ever speaking out. And these forces rarely operated alone. In reality, many of these cappers were closely intertwined within a community of individuals sharing this common practice, many of whom shared techniques, caps and genuine online connections with each other. And as dark as this all may seem, their actual doings are somehow even worse than we could fathom. A fact that would only be fully understood and laid out on a silver platter upon the discovery of an internet-based program known as the Dictionary Kappa. The short-form program began its run here on YouTube back on June 20th, and continued airing weekly for over a year, with each episode having a runtime of roughly 5 minutes, primarily featuring this uncanny host and her robotic voice. If she looks vaguely familiar, you might recognize her and even the layout in general as having come from the old HBO series Flashbacks, an educational program for children, which features a very similar segment called Distraction News.
Good evening. I'm Dora Smarty, and welcome to Distraction News, where we give you the news and then ask you 5 questions about what you just reported.
But the Daily Kappa was a much different show, as its creators stole the imagery from Flashbacks and dubbed over it with this off-putting text-to-speech in order to tell the top-leading stories from the world of Kappa, with the channel's description reading, "The Kappan world is a world that is unknown and mysterious to some, but really there's nothing mysterious about it. The Daily Kappa is here to report bit by bit what goes on in the Kappan world." The page is almost like a time capsule, preserving the wrongdoings of this otherwise obscure community, and putting it all out in the open. And because of this, investigators were understandably immediately drawn to the program, as it quite literally documented all of the highlights in the Kappan community, even discussing some of the group's major players and victims at the time that Tyler Lee had been cast in the anthem.
and again. Those girls know they're going to have their videos shared all over the world. While girls on the internet will cry when they get recorded, that is a huge difference between capping and girls gone wild. Plus they have to ask for permission before they use videos. And they have to be 18 or over. Complete opposite to what goes on here.
By this point, it's clear that both the community and the host of the Daily Capper are completely indeed. Despite some attempts by the community to This wasn't a one-time affair either, as in 2010 the show would return, this time being made into a full program in a styling that we're not used to.
Welcome Cappers and Camp, the official 2010 Capper Awards voting video. Here we will go over the awards in the audience. Black Male of the Year. This one is for the
Again, many of the same disturbed categories remained, with the most prominent being Black Male of the Year, which following community voting will be awarded to a user named Hope1206, who gained notoriety following his harassment of a young girl named Matilda.
The girl Black Male of the Year by the Hope1206. So unusual to every black male. They will give in to every request until Hope gets tired after months from now and releases
this notion, Anonymous dug deeper into the man until they were able to prove that this same account was in constant contact with Amanda and had supposedly been streaming her cab on his account for the whole world to see. And to add even more to Cody's rap sheet, he was supposedly already in the process of being charged with sexual assault on a minor. Anonymous found the guy, and upon confirming this among themselves, they would publish this video including his full docs, with all of his private information being leaked to the whole world, with his real name turning out to actually be Cody. And just like that, the internet's #1 villain was unmasked.